Her feet were bare. Straw clung to her skin. He hadn't seen her when he fed the horses, only when the lantern caught her shape in the loft. Young, Apache, and still breathing. He reached for his rifle. She didn't move. Then he saw the blood. Not hers. Someone else's. Fresh on her hands. Before he could speak, she opened her eyes. Not surprised, not scared. Just watching him. She mouthed something. He stepped closer. A hard knock hit the barn wall, then another. Footsteps. Surrounding the structure. Then silence. The girl looked at the roof and whispered one word. He couldn't understand it, but it didn't matter. Because something had already climbed into the loft, and it wasn't alone. The rifle hung steady in his grip. Every instinct told him to turn, to leave her there, to vanish into the dark while there was still time. But he didn't move. She hadn't screamed, hadn't begged, hadn't blinked, just stared through him as if she knew already what he would choose. He raised a finger. Quiet. Not for her. For the thing that had knocked. The wood creaked again. Far corner. Outside the barn wall. Then nothing. He stepped slow toward the ladder. His boots whispered over straw. Up the rungs, one at a time. Every board groaned louder than it should have. She didn't flinch. At the top, he paused. Scanned the hayloft. Empty. Except for her. No shape crouched in shadow. No eyes watching from the dark. But on the beam above her head, drawn in a jagged line of blood, was a mark he had never seen. A broken circle. Inside it, 4 sharp slashes crossed like teeth. She turned her head slightly, just enough to let him know she saw where he was looking. He knelt beside it, touched the edge of the stain with his finger, still wet. His jaw tightened. He looked back toward the open barn below. The lantern still flickered on the nail. The horses stood silent, motionless, as if whatever had passed through them too. He climbed down without speaking. The ground outside was bare. No footprints, no sound, only the hush of desert night. He stepped beyond the barn wall where the knock had come. The dust was undisturbed. The fence gate hung still. The wind had not moved it. Nothing had. He turned back toward the barn. From the loft, her eyes followed him. She was not afraid. He was. Back inside, he poured water from the tin pail into the basin, rinsed the blood from his finger, dried it on his shirt, sat on the wooden stool and stared at the dirt floor for a long time. Who would mark her like that? Who would follow her and leave no trace? Why was it her hands that were stained and not her skin torn? He looked up again. She had not shifted. Maybe she was running, or maybe she had led something here. Either way, she had not come alone. He took his hat off, ran a hand through his hair. His fingers trembled, and he made them stop. That mark. He had seen carvings in canyons, old ones, symbols no one in town could read, but none looked like this. She did not ask to stay. She did not ask for help. She just watched him. And somehow, it felt like she was waiting for him to catch up to something he had already agreed to. Something he didn't remember saying yes to. Something already in motion. He stayed awake until dawn. The mark still bled quietly above her head. The light came slow through the slats. Dry dust glowed gold in the still air. He had not slept. Not truly, just sat with the rifle across his knees as the dark faded into morning. Above him, she had not shifted once. He stepped outside to the fire pit. Coals still held the night's heat. He coaxed a flame, boiled water, ground the beans himself the way he always had. Habit did not ask permission. The sound of the bubbling pot was the only noise in the world. Inside again, he sliced bread, set 2 pieces and the tin cup on a flat crate, balanced them just inside the ladder's reach, then stepped back. He did not look up at her. A moment passed, another. Then her hand came down. Thin, cautious, not trembling. She took the bread, drew it into the loft. The sound of chewing followed. He waited near the wall, head bowed. One hand on the rifle, but loose now. He did not know if she would speak, or if she could. He did not expect the words when they came. Rough, dry, but clear. "They think I chose you." He looked up. She sat in the hay now, cross-legged, hair tangled with dust and blood, face streaked, eyes too calm. His mouth stayed shut. She didn't explain. Her hands rested in her lap, palms turned upward, not pleading, offering nothing. He rose, walked toward the ladder, stopped at the base. Who is they? The question stayed behind his teeth. What does chose mean? That one stuck deeper. She met his gaze, said nothing more, just watched him with a quiet that weighed more than any cry. He felt the cold of something old crawl beneath his ribs, not fear, not yet, but the shape of it. There were stories men told at campfires about people marked for reasons they never understood, about those drawn into things too big for names. He had never believed them. Now he stood in his own barn, and the girl in his loft had eaten his bread and told him the future was already spoken. A horse whinnied softly outside. Nothing else moved. The coffee had gone cold. She folded the breadcloth and set it beside her. Still no thanks, still no question, just that stare. She believed something had started, and that he, by accident or design, was no longer standing outside it. He turned away, poured the coffee into the dirt. The mark on the beam above her head had dried into black, but it still looked fresh in his mind, like it was waiting to bleed again, like it knew his name before she did. The saddle creaked beneath him. His horse moved steady beneath the weight, hooves stirring dust from the hard-packed earth. The sun was halfway up the eastern slope, and the sky held its pale burn. He kept west, toward the old creek bed, rifle laid across his lap. No tracks, no sound, just the wind brushing over sage and sand. He passed the dry arroyo, dismounted, studied the gravel and brush. Nothing moved, not even birds. He crouched near the rocks. The dust was too settled. No one had come through here. He turned south. By midday, the wind shifted, carried with it something thin, faint, acrid, smoke. He spurred the horse and moved fast. The trail wound past boulders, then dropped into a shallow hollow. That's where he saw it. A wagon, split in two. One wheel shattered. The canvas black with soot. Smoke still rose from the wood like breath from a dying man's mouth. 2 oxen lay collapsed in the dirt, bellies bloated. Flies circled. Their hides hadn't been skinned, just burned. A body lay beside the front wheel, arms sprawled, skin peeled back from the skull. The scalp was gone, but not the way Apache took them. He had seen enough raids to know the signs. This was no quick knife, no clean lifting of hair. This was torn, ripped, as if something bigger had done it, and done it slow. He stepped closer, knees tight. The eyes were still open, the mouth too. But it was the ground beside the body that stopped him. A circle, burned into the dirt, charred black. At the center, 4 lines carved across. Same shape, same teeth, same as the mark above her head. He knelt beside it. The heat was gone, but it still felt alive. His hand reached toward the edge of the circle, hovered there, did not touch. Then something caught the corner of his eye. Fabric, caught on a nail, pale blue, torn. He plucked it free, held it to the light, same weave as the strip she wore around her wrist, same color. She had been here, or she had come from here. He rose. The sun was high now, no birds, no sound but the wind pressing against the scorched wagon. His hand curled around the fabric, and a voice stirred in his head. Not hers. Older. His wife's. Long ago. The night their daughter was born. The fire snapping low in the hearth. Her voice soft against his chest. When spirits walk, they leave signs. If you see one, turn away. If you see 2, leave the land. He looked down at the burned circle. This was 2. He mounted slow, kept the rifle ready. The ride back was quiet, but the silence no longer felt natural. The fabric stayed clenched in his hand. His wife was gone, but her warnings had not gone with her. The moon hung low behind the ridge. Thin light spilled across the barn's roof. Inside, the lantern burned low, casting long shadows across the dirt floor. He sat near the open door, rifle balanced across his knees. The girl was still in the loft. No words since morning, just her breath, steady and slow, above his head. The wind had stopped. Then came hooves. 3 riders. Their shapes cut sharp against the horizon. No hurry in their pace. Just slow, deliberate movement through the dark. He stood, watched them approach. The horse nearest him snorted and pawed at the earth like it wanted to speak. The riders dismounted as one. Boots quiet in the dust. Faces pale in the moonlight. White men. Trail-worn. Wore scout coats and old Union leathers. Dust crusted deep in every seam. The kind of dust that did not come off. One of them stepped forward. Broad shoulders, hands open at his sides. He smiled. Too wide. The man said he was just passing through. Said they were looking for someone. A girl. Young. Apache. Ran off with something sacred. Said they had no wish for trouble, just needed her returned. He listened, gave a nod, kept his hands close to the rifle but not on it. Said he hadn't seen any girl. Said no one had passed through here in weeks. The 3rd rider stepped closer to the open barn. A long knife sat in his belt. Around his neck, a necklace of thin white bones. At the center, carved into the largest one, was a symbol, a broken circle, 4 slashes. His eyes locked in on it. The shape burned behind his ribs. The scout followed his gaze. Fingers brushed the necklace once. Light touch. Like it meant nothing. But it did. All 3 stood still. The one who had spoken first smiled again. Said if anyone came through, they would be grateful for word. They turned, mounted, and rode off into the dark without looking back. He stood in the doorway long after the dust had settled. Only when the silence had returned did he speak. You saw that? He knew she had. The hay above shifted. Her voice came low, dry, flat. They are not men, not anymore. He stared at the dirt, the mark on the beam, the blood that had dried but never stopped bleeding in his memory. He did not ask what they were. Eos just sat back down on the stool, rifle across his lap, eyes on the barn door. The moon kept rising, and something deep in his gut started to understand that whatever had begun had already crossed into the place where the names lost their meaning. The fire had burned down to coals. The barn held the heat of the day trapped in the wood and dirt. Outside, the land lay silent again. He waited by the ladder. She descended on her own. Bare feet touched the packed earth without sound. She did not hurry. She did not hesitate. She stood in the lantern light and looked at the mark above the beam one last time before turning to him. Now they follow. Because I touched it. He did not interrupt. Her voice was low, flat, as if she were reciting something long memorized. She spoke of her village, of morning fires and cooking smoke and children chasing dogs between the lodges, of a place her people never dug into, never farmed, never crossed without prayer. She said men came wearing skin that looked like men, white, tall, speaking words she did not know. They killed quickly, not like warriors, like hunger. They left the elders where they fell. They took her alive, not for mercy, for work. She was tied and walked for days, past rock faces that whispered in the heat, past caves her people said were mouths. They brought her to the land they broke open. She told him of a pit carved into stone that was not stone, of a shape sealed with teeth that did not belong to any animal she had ever named. They made her touch it. Her hands shook when she lifted them for him to see. Burns traced faint along the lines of her palms, long healed, still raw in memory. When she touched it, something inside the earth shifted. Then they knew she was marked, and then they followed. She escaped because the ground moved at night, cracked, split. Half the men fell into it, the others ran. She ran too. She did not stop running until the dirt burned her lungs and the night lost its meaning. He said nothing through it all. The story filled the space between them like smoke. He understood now why she did not beg, why she watched instead of pleaded. She had already been chosen, not by him, by whatever waited beneath the land. "They think I chose you." The words returned to him with weight. "Chose you to hide me? Chose you to die with me? Or chose you to be the next place it touched?" He felt the shape of the future settle into his chest with the quiet finality of truth. This was not about shelter, not about mercy, not even about survival. This was about what had been pulled loose and what still wanted to walk. He rose, stepped to the doorway, looked out across his land, dry earth, open dark. No movement, yet he felt watched by something without eyes. He turned back to her. His voice came rough. "You stay here tonight. Not a promise, not an offer. A decision." She inclined her head once. Acceptance. Outside, the desert held its breath. He rode out early, just past sunup. The barn behind him was quiet. The girl had not spoken again. She stayed in the loft, knees tucked beneath her chin, eyes on the dust that floated through slats in the roof. The trail east bent along the dry arroyo, then cut through a pass where cacti grew tall and strange. He followed the sun until the mission walls came into view. White adobe, cracked and flaking. A bell that no longer rang. The old priest sat where he always sat, on the low stone bench beneath the archway, eyes half closed in the sun. A dog slept at his feet. The cowboy dismounted, tied the reins to the post, walked forward. The priest opened his eyes before the cowboy spoke, saw the look in him, motioned to follow. They stepped into the cool shadow of the chapel. The walls smelled of earth and time. Candles burned low in the alcoves, watched over by wooden saints whose faces were worn smooth. He told the priest about the mark, not what it meant, just what it looked like. A circle, broken. 4 lines through it like claws or teeth. The priest went still, then pale. He turned toward the far wall, took down a faded cloth and rolled it back. Behind it, etched in charcoal and blood, was the same shape. The priest called it the circle that breathes. He spoke of an old place, buried deep beneath the mesas, a place sealed long before white men rode horses across these lands, a thing once worshipped, then feared, then buried. He said the mark was not just a warning, it was a mouth. When it appears on the land, it means something has opened its jaw, and if it opens fully, no law will stand. No bullet will find its mark. No man will live long enough to name what killed him. The cowboy said nothing. The priest studied his face, asked what had brought the mark to him. He did not answer. But in his mind, he saw the girl's hands, the palms, scarred, lines jagged and deep. Not just wounds, shapes, curves, like ridges drawn into skin. He had thought them burns. Now he saw them for what they were, maps. She had not only been marked, she had been carved. The land itself had left its shape in her. The cowboy stepped out from the chapel. Sun beat down hard across the courtyard. He mounted without a word. The priest remained in the doorway, crossed himself with a shaking hand. The ride home was long. Each rock he passed looked sharper. Each shadow stretched too far. He did not know what part of the land her scars pointed to, but he knew now what she carried. She was not just running from something, she was leading it, and he was already too close to turn back. The heat sat heavy on the plains. Midday light burned through the brush and bleached the hills in silence. He rode slow across the northern ridge, not looking for anything in particular, just thinking. He had not told her where he was going. She had not asked. The dry wind shifted. Then he saw him. A figure hunched against a rock shelf, tattered coat, hat slouched low, a limp to his stance, like the land no longer agreed with his bones. The cowboy pulled the horse up short. The man turned, an old face, half blind, one eye filmed with white, beard sun-faded, a face he had known once across a poker table and the smoke of bad nights. A drifter, a killer in his time. A voice that used to laugh too loud. Now that voice came dry. Said the girl was not a girl. Said she was a key. Said she walked between dawn and blood, and if the cowboy stood beside her, the earth would open and eat his name. The cowboy dismounted slow. The man's hands shook as he reached into his coat. Not for a gun, for a knife. Carved, old stone handle. Runes carved down the spine. He offered it. Said he would do it for him. Said the girl would not suffer. Said it was mercy before the land split beneath them all. The cowboy stared at him, then stepped forward. The old man smiled. That smile vanished with the first punch. The cowboy hit him hard. Again, then again. Fist against bone. The drifter fell but kept talking. Said the ground already knew his scent. Said, once you stand beside a marked one, you are already inside the circle. Said, it was too late. The cowboy grabbed the knife and threw it far into the rocks, then stood over him, breath heavy, fists clenched, blood on his knuckles. His own or not, he did not care. The drifter lay still. His mouth moved one more time. Not a curse. Not a plea. Just a name. The cowboy's name. Spoken like a sentence passed. He mounted and rode back fast. Dust kicked behind him. The barn rose against the dry sky like a wound. She sat outside now, in the shade of the wall. Eyes open, hands in her lap, no expression. He dismounted, did not speak. She looked at the blood on his hands, then looked away. She had not asked for protection, but he gave it anyway. Not because he believed her story, not because he feared what followed her, but because something inside him had moved when she spoke. And that thing would not let him watch her die, no matter what came next, no matter what it cost. The sun hung high overhead, and somewhere beneath them the ground listened. The wind came just after dusk, not strong, just enough to carry the scent of oil. He stood from the porch, too late. The first flame caught the edge of the barn roof, a sudden burst, then a roar. The dry timber lit like paper. Horses screamed from inside. He ran. The girl was still in the loft, still in the circle. The fire moved fast. Smoke curled downward before it rose. Heat pressed hard against his skin as he shoved the barn doors wide and shouted for the horses. Two broke through the stalls and bolted into the dark. The others kicked and bucked behind the flame. He climbed the ladder. The top rung cracked under his foot. She knelt inside the chalk ring. Head bowed. Eyes closed. The boards around her glowed orange. Embers rained from the ceiling. Flames traced the rafters above like veins. She did not move. He shouted her name. She did not answer. He crossed the beam and reached for her. The heat peeled at his arms. Smoke burned his eyes. Still she sat in the center of the circle, untouched by ash. Her hands rested on her knees. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then a timber cracked behind him. He grabbed her. She did not fight. He lifted her against his chest and dropped back down the ladder as the upper loft began to collapse. The moment they hit the ground, the center beam gave out. A rain of sparks swallowed the hay above. He ran from the barn, lungs clawing for air, boots dragging through ash. They fell to the dirt outside. She gasped, then coughed. Her palms were blistered. Red streaks ran across her skin, but her eyes opened, and her voice came steady. It is waking. He looked back at the barn. The fire danced high against the night sky. The mark above the beam had turned to smoke, but he remembered it. He would always remember it. She sat up slow, cradled her hands. He said nothing. There were no figures in the dark, no shadows circling, only the burning frame of what once held shelter. She watched the flame rise and flicker. Then she looked to the stars. The sky did not blink, but the ground beneath them did not feel still. She turned to him, her voice low. It has smelled fire now. He felt it too, not fear, not yet, but the weight of something shifting underfoot, like the world had turned its face. and opened its mouth. The barn groaned once more behind them, then fell silent. They left before sunrise. No words passed between them. He saddled the remaining horse. She walked beside it, not asking to ride. Her hands were wrapped in cloth torn from what little had survived the fire. The land beyond the ridge was dry and brittle. The heat rose early. The trail vanished quickly. Only the wind seemed to know the way. She moved without hesitation, like she had walked this path in another life, or never left it. By midday, they reached the far edge of the canyon. Low shrubs and dead brush clung to the rock. The sky above stretched wide and blank. She stopped at a split in the stone, bent low, cleared away dust and thorn with her wrapped hands. Beneath the brush lay a mouth, stone, sealed, cracked across the top where time had pressed against it. He saw the shape carved into the lip of the stone. A circle, broken. 4 lines carved across, the same mark, the one on her palms, the one burned in his barn. She stood over it, silent. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out what they had saved from the fire, a wooden plank, charred, blackened, the symbol still visible. She nodded once. He stepped forward. Together they lowered the burned wood into the stone mouth. The air shifted, not the wind, something deeper. The ground trembled beneath their boots, a short breath of movement, not enough to fall, just enough to feel the world remember itself. Then silence, until a voice came from the rocks above. Wrong, the sound stretched the word too long, dry, hollow, as if it came through something dead. He turned. A figure stood at the canyon edge, one of the riders from the night they came. His coat was torn, dust clung to his face, but it was his eyes that stopped the breath in the cowboy's throat. Black. No whites, no light, no man in them. The figure took one step down the rock. His body moved like it remembered walking but had forgotten how bones worked. He opened his mouth, but the voice came from everywhere. She is not yours to protect. The girl did not move. The cowboy raised his rifle. The figure did not flinch. She stepped between them. Her burned hands raised, palms open. The mark on the wood in the pit below still glowed, faint, red, like coals buried under ash. The figure paused, its head tilted. A sound came from its chest, not a growl, not a word, something like breathing through earth. Then the voice again. You cannot close what is waking. The cowboy fired. The shot cracked through the canyon. The figure dropped, but it did not fall like a man. It folded, crumbled, like dust poured from a sack. Then nothing. The wind moved again, but this time it carried a whisper. Not from her, not from him, from below. The dust had not yet settled. Bits of the man's coat clung to the rocks, but there was no blood, no flesh, just grains and ash caught in the cracks where he had stood. The cowboy lowered his rifle. The girl knelt beside the stone mouth. The burned wood had stopped glowing. Its edges had cooled to black. The circle at the center now split open like a wound that had emptied itself. She laid both hands on the edge of the pit. Her fingers pressed against the carved lines. The scars on her palms fit into the grooves like keys into locks. A low sound answered her touch, deep, slow, like something large breathing out beneath the earth. Then the stone began to shift. The crack along the top groaned as the sides pressed inward. Dust rose in slow spirals. The earth trembled again, less now, like it was sighing. The gap sealed, not fast, not sudden, just final. He watched her, waited for her to collapse or cry out or say something to mark what had just passed. She stood, wiped her hands on the cloth, looked down at the pit, then turned to him. There were lines beneath her eyes now that had not been there before. Not age, something deeper. She said it was done. Her voice was thin, dry from heat and dust and the weight of too many miles. He stepped forward, not close, just enough. Asked her name. She looked at him. The paws stretched, not cruel, not empty, just a silence shaped like goodbye. She turned, walked toward the ridge. He did not stop her. The sun had started to drop behind the far mesas. Shadows stretched across the stone. The cowboy looked down at the sealed mouth. Nothing marked the stone now but dust and old carvings too faded to name. No heat, no sound, no threat. He knelt, touched the stone once. It felt like earth should feel. Dry, still, impassive. But something in him knew the price had only been delayed. He stood and watched until her shape was lost against the rocks, then mounted his horse. The ride back was long and silent. When he reached the place where the barn had stood, only blackened timbers remained. He left them as they were. That night, he sat on the ground beside the ashes. The stars above watched without interest. He thought of her hands, of the mark, of the way the man had crumbled like the land itself had refused to remember him. He would not rebuild the barn. He would not forget the sound that had come from beneath them. And when the wind blew through the valley, he did not close his eyes. He listened, because something had stirred once and might stir again. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and comment on the Old Western Tales.